welcome to the big political verdict. This really is the biggest economic event of the year. Budget 2017 has been hailed in some quarters as a balanced fiscal exercise which pleases and touches all sections and strata of the society. But in another view that's coming in, the opposition is certainly not amused as it calls the budget a damn squib. So how should one rate this budget? And cutting across political lines, what is the big political verdict? To discuss that and a lot more, we're joined by Nalin, Kohli of the BJP, Rajiv, Gowda of the Congress Party, and Pawan, Varma. Always a very balanced view from the JDU right here on the big political verdict. Thanks each one of you for being with us. And just because Nalin Kohli represents the Treasury benches, I'm going to kickstart the discussion with him. And Nalin, Rahul Gandhi says that the nation was expecting fireworks. What came in was a damn squib. How do you counter that?
Well, Mr. Rahul Gandhi has confirmed yet once again that he speaks only by a written script, irrespective of what the scene is or what the story is. Because when he came out, he immediately said this budget had nothing. When a question was asked of him about the income tax rate reduction, which is massive in terms of, the middle class, he said, no, let's talk of fundamentals. And then he went on to further say that nothing has been done for railway safety. So was he snoozing while the budget was being announced? Because 1 lakh crores has been put aside to create a corpus for railway safety alone. So it's perhaps that Mr. Rahul Gandhi, then he said that all we heard was a couplet. We heard couplets. In the entire 1 hour, 40-minute speech, the finance minister, Mr. Jaitley, only had spoken one couplet. So, I mean, if he considered the rest of the budget speech a couplet, that probably points more fingers to his understanding of what the budget exercise is.
All right, now that you've countered Rahul Gandhi's charge, I'm going to take it across to Rajiv Gowda, who's actually put out just 24 or 48 hours actually before the union budget. He put out the real assessment of the Indian economy. And Mr. Gowda, this budget, Rahul Gandhi believes is a damn squib. What does the economist in you tell you?
Well, this certainly is a budget that aims to, it's a damage control. It's an attempt at damage control. Demonetization has devastated various sectors of the economy. And if you look, the Manrega hike is aimed at coping with the vast mass exodus of people from from rural migrants back to villages, from urban areas looking for jobs. If you look at the tax cut, it's aimed at trying to give some kind of a fillip to consumption, which has come down substantially. And if you look at the effort to help out MSMEs, that's again a recognition that that sector has been badly damaged. It may be too little too late, because really MSMEs are really having a difficult time even paying interest, to forget paying taxes on their profits. And so what we see here is really a budget that is trying to cope with the devastation that's been wrought by demonetization. And then, of course, as Rahul Gandhi has been highlighting, as our report has highlighted, jobs are the central concern. And the economic survey yesterday had suggestions for the finance minister by saying focus on apparel, focus on leather. So when your own economic advisor gives you such advice, why not take it? Those are sectors which have a good employment multiplier. Instead, where there's nothing specific in this budget for such job-creating sectors. So overall, this is a very, very disappointing budget. It's the only thing we can be happy about is that just like they did some dramatic demonetization, they didn't do something dramatically crazy with this budget. So in that sense, I think people are there's a sigh of relief that people are heaving.
All right, so nothing dramatic. It's an incremental exercise, if I may. Pawan, Varma, are you going to be as scathing of the budget as Rajiv Gowda is?
Now, I think the budget has three fundamental problems. First of all, it's premised on a verifiable track record of a gulf between promise and delivery. We've seen it happen in the case of 2 crore jobs annually, MSP increase, black money coming from abroad, putting something in everybody's pocket. Secondly, I think the budget falls flat between two stools. It neither does enough. It neither does enough for the corporate sector in order to kickstart the economy in another kind of way, which I think was the true inclination of the government, nor does it do enough for the poor, particularly those who have been greatly affected most recently in the agricultural sector and as a consequence of demonetization. I believe that behind the miasma of statistics which the finance minister, of course, is best positioned to unleash, and the many new schemes that he continuously announces in every budget, if you read the fine print, there are a series of jumlas which actually leave most viewers quite foxed, or commentators. Let me take the issue of demonetization. In demonetization, we had supported the intent of the government in fighting black money and corruption,
Right.
and we thought the budget is the appropriate occasion for the finance minister to give an accountability of what this step has achieved. How much black money has come back? What are you going to do for those who have been affected by the budget? What steps are you taking to go beyond merely attacking black money in cash, including through Benami property, gold and bullion, money abroad? We had no answers on that. Then take a series of jumlas, and if you give me 1 minute more, I will finish. You know, the budget says 10,000 crores to banks for their recapitalization. You are aware of the problem of the NPAs. This is less than a drop in the ocean. The figure seems impressive, but the impact will be next to zero. The budget says 10,000 crore for credit to farmers. Do you know that on a per capita basis, half of India's farmers are under a debt of 47,000 rupees per capita? If you give them more credit, they are in no position to absorb it or take it, and banks which are under the burden of NPAs can hardly give it. So what does this figure mean in terms of providing a salve to those affected
Right.
in agriculture after 2 years of drought? Then you say, I'll just give 1 or 2 examples and then Nalin can answer also.
Right.
Then you say that, you repeat what you said last year, that we will double farmers' income in 5 years' time. You know, the average annual income
Right.
of the median farmer, as per the NSS, is 20,000 rupees annually. You double it, it's 40,000 rupees annually. That works out to 3,500 rupees or less per month. Factor in inflation, it means even less. Is this the agricultural revolution you were looking for? And along with that, there are so many other jumlas. We'll lift 1 crore people out of
Right,
poverty.
right.
How? We will 50,000, you know, there's a figure, 50,000 gram panchayats will come out of poverty. How? Please give us the roadmap. So all I'm
Mr.
trying
Varma,
to say
I'm sorry,
is, na khuda
yes.
hi mila na visale sanam.
All right. Now, khuda hi mila na misale sanam. But let's take this across to Nalin Kohli, and I'm asking him the question that you raised about the rural economy, something that Mr. Gowda also raised. The criticism from the Congress party and from the other opposition, Nalin, really at this point in time is that not enough has been done as far as the rural sector is concerned. The budget lacks a rural focus. There isn't really much for the Indian farmer. Counter that argument.
Well, then now we know why the UPA government was responsible for such a poor economic management. 10 lakh crore for farmers' credit, 60 days tax waiver for rural in terms of aiming to double farmers' income in 5 years. Manrega, highest ever allocation of almost 48,000 crores to create, and that to creation of assets that will help farmers in terms of ponds. Increasing it from 5 lakh to 10 lakh small ponds, geospatial location of the ponds and putting the entire spending of funds in public domain, microcredit, all of it is for the farmers, linking up those who produce vegetables with also the end processing units so that they can get better better returns for their vegetables. If this is not for farmers, then what is?
Mr. Gowda, you still would dispute the fact that the budget doesn't do much for rural India. I know Pawan Varma has been very vocal about this, that how are you going to double agri-incomes? How are you going to do some of the things that you've promised famously in the last budget and this budget? Nalin Kohli puts up a defense, but does that cut ice with you as far as the distressed farmer is concerned, the distressed rural sector is concerned? Because I think the counter argument that I wanted to make to Nalin also was that this budget doesn't really do much as far as rural spending goes. Is that a point of concern with the Congress party?
Oh, absolutely. If you actually look at some of the points that he raised, many of them are nice to have, but they do not address the distress that has occurred as a result of 2 drought years, the distress due to demonetization. You've heard enough stories about our distress sales because there's been no cash for in terms of being able to dictate a particular price in the marketplace. So these are nice steps going forward, but how much is the actual offtake in terms of insurance? Or what is the actual, if you look at Manrega, look at the number that is being touted and look at the backlog. There's there's 14 lakh crores, 14,000 crores worth of backlog in Manrega payments that have not yet been paid. So the number that they're offering here is quite deceptive in that sense, because it hides what actually will be spent going forward. Otherwise, some of those measures are nice, but they're not necessarily putting money in the hands of, in the pockets of farmers. Now, go to other issues. The one about jobs, right? Pawan Varma rightly highlighted that there was a promise of 2 crore, 1 crore, give every youth a job. What has been done in that case in this budget? The leather sector, the apparel sector, all those things are not being addressed. If you look at private capital, right, the private sector is neither borrowing from a stressed banking system, nor is it spending. Gross capital formation has gone down tremendously. And so what is there in this budget that's actually going to turn those things around? So these are questions that you have to ask. Right. The announcements that are made by the finance minister are grandiose, but the actual reality in terms of execution, as Pawan Varma pointed out, is far from the target. And worst of all, this all comes out of our pockets, the pockets of the poor, because of an extraordinary reliance on indirect taxes. Right. The price of crude oil comes down, the government jacks up excise duties on petrol and diesel. It hurts economic growth, it hurts the poor the most, and it takes away discretionary spending from the private sector, from individuals, which would have had a much better impact in terms of economic growth. Very, very disappointing, this kind of pattern.
And instead of cutting indirect taxes, some would say, yes, and some would say that instead of cutting indirect taxes, is actually cut direct taxes, which impacts very few people. But Nalin, Kohli, I'm going to throw this question to you, because both Mr. Pawan Varma and Rajiv Gowda made the point about jobs. And that really is the biggest lacuna as far as the gulf that Mr. Varma pointed out between delivery and execution and planning is concerned. What about jobs? No matter what you may say, there has been a 90% decline in pace of job creation in the last 6 years. Does the budget do enough to create new jobs in the Indian economy? Our panel here believes, no, it doesn't.
Actually, yes. And if you look at it in terms of those who understand economics and look at the macro picture, then you can see the thrust very clearly. There's a massive spending on infrastructure. In fact, the spending is up almost by 24%. Then if you look at the Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana, which was a runaway success, and that's all about youth, employability, creating employment further, the government is increasing it, doubling it to almost 2.5 lakh crores. Now that's a huge jump. If you look at the MSME, which is the backbone of manufacturing, or it's the massive sector, you're looking at, income tax rates falling to an effective rate of 25% and the threshold going up to 50%. If you look at housing, in terms of, the scheme for housing and affordable housing, now all of this at the end of the day translates to jobs. What are jobs? Jobs are not just what government would come out in terms of advertisements. Jobs are essentially in terms of expansion of economic activity and self-employment also, and creating that opportunity. Leather was brought in for a specific mention, because if you would go to the economic survey, then you notice that leather and textiles are the two areas that have been found to be labor intensive. I think if I got the figures correctly, every lakh of investment in the textile sector creates about 23 jobs as compared to 7 jobs in the leather sector. So leather requires a boost, leather requires permission, leather requires the government to intervene in some way and give them benefits and incentives. So I think this is all at the end of the day to translate to jobs.
Mr. Varma, does this cut ice with you? And let me be the devil's advocate for a minute. I think the point that Nalin was trying to really make is that there is an effort to job creation, but it's not being created. I think both you and Mr. Gowda pointed out to gross capital formation that has taken a hit. There is no private sector investment that's happening, and as a result and a consequence of that, no jobs are being created. I'm going to be candid and ask you the question. Private sector investment is not just an act of faith, it is also an act of opportunity. And the opportunity perhaps is missing. We are living in a world where corporates are over-leveraged, there is overcapacity, we're living in a very uncertain neighborhood, the world is increasingly looking inwards. In that sense, can we blame the government alone for no investments? Can we blame the government alone for no jobs? Because perhaps the avenue to create jobs has shrunk considerably, and it's perhaps beyond government control.
No, I think let's give a cushion of solace to the government that it's not an easy task. But when people make statements, and my good friend Nalin says Mudra is a runaway success, then why have you created 1,35,000 jobs when your target was 2 crore jobs? You rightly said investment is at a historic low. Credit offtake is low. No new industrial units are being created. There's no roadmap to kickstart economic activity, partnering with the private sector. And while all of this is missing, you have done nothing really for the poor who have suffered 3 months of great economic dislocation, and in the agriculture sector 2 years of successive drought. Now I ask Mr. Kohli, when you bandy around figures, take a figure, does Mr. Kohli actually believe that we have built 10 lakh ponds, agricultural ponds in the last 1 year? But the finance minister used it in a statement, 10 lakh agricultural ponds, and he said another 5 lakh agricultural ponds will be added. Are we a lake country, pond country? This kind of statistical jugglery will not wash. People are looking for real content and a roadmap towards economic recovery. I think that is what the budget lacked, and I want to add another point here. There's a great regional inequity. Supriya, in India as today, we were looking forward, and I speak now from the point of view of Bihar, which in spite of its best efforts, because of a historical legacy, remains a least developed state. What have you done to correct it? Today, 90 to 95% of all private and public flows go to 4 or 5 relatively developed states. You need to have a policy instrumentality and institutional approach to rectify this regional imbalance. Nothing has been done to it. You have given 2 AIMS universities to 2 BJP-ruled states, Gujarat and Jharkhand. You must see India as a holistic entity. There have to be these rectifications.
I get your point there. And Rajiv, Gowda, if I may throw this to you, in some sense, do you also agree with Pawan Varma that this whole idea of competitive federalism is actually making India a very lopsided country where pockets of India are going to shine over the long term and pockets will continue to exist in the dark? So that's question number 1 coming your way, Rajiv Gowda. And question number 2 also is that while we can blame the BJP and I agree with Pawan Varma, we're not a country of ponds and lakes, so please stop making that argument once again, Nalin Kohli. But Rajiv Gowda, your government also has to be blamed for stalled investments. Investments began to stall under the UPA tenure. We've just continued to live in that mess, and this government, for all its promises, hasn't been able to revive sentiment and hasn't been able to make corporates take a leap of faith and begin investing. So 2 questions there. Competitive federalism and the impact of this over the long term, and also, the capital formation, capital expenditure, perhaps the rot began under the UPA.
See, let me answer your first question. The challenge for any central government is to be imaginative, is to think about the larger picture across the nation, to look at policy measures that will enable certain backward regions to be incentivized, to be developed, etc. And that's what we had put in place all these years with a backward region development fund, with all kinds of other special status for particular areas, various measures that would help redress imbalances. Certain states are more competitive. You see that with the internal migration that takes place within the country when people go to certain cities which are engines of growth. So that process is happening naturally. But those who are losing out, that's where the central government has to step forward and come up with imaginative solutions. And so far we're not seeing those kinds of solutions. In fact, there's a tendency to say we'll pass on more of the burden to the states and let them handle it. And that can actually worsen the inequalities that we see in the country already. You hide behind the Finance Commission, the 14th Finance Commission's devolution, but the truth of the matter is you need to do much more to ensure that that kind of imbalance does not persist. Now, when you talk about the UPA's track record and private sector investment, etc., let's go back to when the UPA was in power. We have weathered the 2008 global crisis. Over 10 years, we provided 7.5% plus average growth rate. We brought 140 million people out of poverty. So the accomplishments are tremendous. But there were issues with, with certain natural resource allocation to particular projects. The Supreme Court got involved, so things did slow down. And but that doesn't mean that we don't. Where did all those mega airports come from?
Right.
Aren't those infrastructure? Didn't you see the kind of mega new national highways that have emerged over the last few years? That's the infrastructure that we brought in.
Right.
The private and the public worked together. Yes, there were cases where many private players over-leveraged themselves, and that's why they find themselves in difficulty. And that was this happens when when there is a boom time attitude and people over-leverage themselves. And but this government came in with the promise of being able to resolve these kinds of issues. They were going to turn things around.
Right.
If you minimum government, maximum governance.
Right.
The biggest job creator has been government in the last couple of years. No,
Mr.
not
Gowda,
in the private
Mr.
sector.
Gowda, let me just get in here. Let me just get in here. I get your point. I get your point, but I do want to move on to the other part of this debate, and that has to do with fiscal discipline. Nalin Kohli, you may question Rahul Gandhi's understanding of the budget, but the one man whose understanding you perhaps cannot question is Pariyappan Chidambaram. And in an interview to ET Now just late last evening, the only one that he actually gave before the budget, he made it very clear that a miss on fiscal deficit target is unacceptable. The finance minister fails if he does that. My question really is very simple. Has the government lost credibility by missing 3% for next fiscal?
Well, actually, Mr. Chidambaram is the right person to even have spoken about why did the fiscal deficit reach such a high proportion of 4.5% under his tenure. So he was the right person to actually answer that. Mr. Arun Jaitley, as the finance minister, is responsible for correcting that very, very unfortunate situation which was a stress on the Indian economy. Despite the FRBM committee saying that we could have dipped into that 0.5 emergency provision, he has decided to go ahead with it. You are seeing expenditure increasing, you are seeing the whole budgetary exercise moving to boost investments, and at the end of it, if the former finance minister is questioning the rationale over a 0.2%, but not speaking on the increase of almost a 2% under his tenure to 4.5%, then it just tells you that what conviction he might be speaking from.
Pawan, Varma, I want you to come in on the point that Nalin Kohli has made about fiscal deficit, fiscal discipline. I just want to take this debate away from fiscal discipline for a minute and talk about privatization. NDA 1 privatized a lot, but it looks like privatization is a bad word under Mr. Modi. Will you concur with me, Mr. Varma?
But I would have thought that the disinvestment exercise judiciously pursued would have yielded both revenue and I think would have been the right economic choice. But I don't believe it's gone far enough. It's always been some kind of halting approach given a big banner advertisement. And I want to say that the real issues are being ignored as a result of this policy. There's been a spectacular abdication of the state from such vital sectors as health and education. Please, Mr. Kohli, tell us, what is the percentage of the budget you've given to education and health when they are crying needs of this country? I was particularly disappointed by Mr. Jaitley's speech on education. It lacked all specifics. There were no mentions of mass schemes of benevolence like the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, how much is allocated, what can be done to improve midday meal schemes, how will we improve enrollment and the quality of education. The percentage of the budget that is allocated to such a vital sector remains low. And even on the question, finally, if I may add, of financial transparency, elections and funding, I think that it was more in the nature of a dramatic announcement without the fine print. 2,000 rupees must be, beyond that you identify donors. What about auditing of parties' accounts? Are you going to make them, bring them under the RTI? Or are you going to move towards the cashless conduct of allocations?
Right.
There's an Indrajit Gupta committee report which talks of state funding of elections. There are no details. You just make a token move towards financial transparency, which we welcome. But you have to follow up concretely, and the budget should give a roadmap.
I'm glad you say you welcome that move. Nalin Kohli, I'm throwing that question to you on political funding. Many people believe the government is beginning to walk at least the talk. Indrajit Gupta committee is a big reference point that you could have made. But are you hopeful of a broader political consensus on this matter? You have an opposition leader, Pawan Varma, saying they're willing to support if there is a concrete plan. There is no concrete plan, it seems, right now.
There has to be, because that's what public sentiment is for. This public sentiment is for elimination of black money. And if we look at Prime Minister Modi's government consistently from the first cabinet decision where the SIT on black money was formed to various provisions that have been brought in, whether in terms of foreign assets, whether it was the voluntary disclosure scheme, not voluntary disclosure scheme, but the income disclosure scheme, whether it is thereafter the demonetization move, whether it's expansion of the tax base and converting black to white in terms of the color of money through explanations or increasing the tax rate, all of it points that the public at large wants definitely the country to have a cleaner transactional situation, and certainly from that perspective I think that political parties have to respond to it. Prime Minister Modi himself spoke about this in his address to the nation in December 2016. So I think this is consistently moving in that direction. Those who don't, I think they are going against national and public sentiment.
I'm actually out of time here, and so I'm going to seek your indulgence, Mr. Gowda, very briefly. Many people believe political funding or political funding of elections or the kind of things that they have said as far as, political funding is concerned is a bold step. Is the Congress party willing to support a broader political consensus if it were to be in the making on this one?
Absolutely. It costs a lot of money to keep a democracy alive and flourishing, and that money has to come, and it has to come cleanly. Every political party, if they're interested in strengthening our democracy, will have an interest in that. The Congress will be the foremost amongst them. Let's get the parties together. Let's brainstorm. Let's talk about state funding. Let's talk about other measures. But the measures here that are announced, moving from 20,000 to 2,000 may just not actually cut it. They may just get you a lot more numbers of donors. So we have to work together to clean the political system. The Congress party will be first ready to sit down and work out the details to cleanse the system and to ensure that democracy builds on clean, legitimate funding with people's involvement in the entire process.
All right. It's a price that one pays to keep a democracy alive. But thank you very much, each one of you, Pawan Varma, Rajiv Gowda and Nalin Kohli, for discussing Budget 2017, which we at the Times Network believe is India's tryst with destiny. Whether it does deliver in the long term, the jury's still out there. Thanks very much for being with us.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.